The truth occurs. The truth occurs.
Hi everyone. Well, there's this guy, Paul Babeu, sheriff in Arizona, Pinal County, Arizona Sheriff Paul Babeu, resigned his post as Mitt Romney's Arizona campaign manager amid revelations about his private life and allegations of personal misconduct. Apparently, he had some gay lover, a Mexican guy, and he told him that if he, told anybody about their affair, that he would have him deported. So this is one thing. But then what came up later was that he had worked at this school in Massachusetts during the 90s called the DeSisto School. Said he became the headmaster and executive director of DeSisto. Documents, Babeu ran private boarding school with history of physical abuse. And not only that, but he had an affair with a student who was at the time 17, which was legal age. The student he was a former student who had been made faculty and lived off campus with Paul. And in this second article here from abc15.com, they were talking about the school and saying things like, well, that the kids were abused. A person who formerly went there said it was cult-like, and that they were subjected to things like being put in the corner for days, even weeks on end. They were neglected. They were forced to wear sheets, stripped down, strip searched. They also say routinely took group showers, leading to sexual abuse. Now, I know that this is true about the school, what they say about how the kids were treated. And you know how I know this? Well, because I went there. I was actually at that school for about 3.5 years. And that's why I took an interest in this article, because this was a residential school. The difference between a residential school and a boarding school actually is that at a boarding school you still retain your human rights. As at a residential school, they can pretty much do whatever they want with you. Well, they shouldn't be able to, but that's what happens in practice. This school was run by a guy who, as in the other article, describes as a megalomaniac who envisioned a string of schools nationally and international based on Gestalt psychological principles. His name was Michael DeSisto. He was a megalomaniac, that much is true. He actually had lied about all his credentials to the parents in the brochure. His resume was fake. He was a gay pedophile. His marriage was just a show marriage to make him look like he was not gay. He was known to be gay in the gay community, and he had been a prostitute at the age of 19, and he was a pedophile. And there were a lot of allegations of abuse at this school. I was never abused, probably because I was of the wrong gender. At the time, I always wondered why Michael didn't like me. I thought maybe I wasn't special enough, but it's probably just because I was a girl. But as far as Paul Babeu goes, he was not running the school. Michael ran the school. Michael ran the school and was God. So you can't blame Paul Babeu for the way that school was run. It was a crazy... I just heard a thumping noise. It was a crazy school, and definitely I would say that the students' normal human rights were violated. It was eventually shut down by Child Protective Services, but it had been operating for decades, and I think it started out as sort of okay place, and then as Michael got, crazier and crazier, drunk with his own power, it just deteriorated. I was there in the 80s where it was sort of in a in-between phase. It wasn't, that great to be there, but it wasn't all bad either. From what I hear, it got much, much worse later on. It was completely insane. I mean, they had kids there was a kid who swallowed razors and they wouldn't take her to the hospital. They deprived kids of food and water and sleep and all kinds of things. Well, we were always deprived of sleep, but it got worse. Paul Babeu didn't set the school up. It was the way it was before he got there. The fact that he worked there, I don't really think that should... This becomes like a smear campaign. I don't really think that the fact that he worked there should portray him as some kind of, malevolent pedophile. Oh, the guy that he had the affair with was young. It's a bit weird, but he was, at the age of consent. Why target Paul Babeu? I mean, this stuff is systemic. It's almost normal. There's so much routine abuse of children in the system, whether it's foster care, residential schools, or any kind of institution. It's so routine, and it involves people in very high places. I mean, you have the whole thing with Holly Greig over in Scotland. You have the Franklin cover-up. There are lots of things. I've posted some articles about this on my blog. Actually, speaking of Arizona, the Sheriff Joe Arpaio's department, there were some very shady things going on there, apparently, with some people involved in the department. I mean, it's really, really dirty and dark and disgusting, and it's so widespread. And the problem in general is that the system that is meant to be protecting children, it's in that system that they're more likely than ever to be abused. That's the big problem. And Paul Babeu was never accused of anything. There were no allegations against him specifically at that school. But to have a man having an affair with a 17-year-old, that was like probably the least of it, at that school. For that kid, it was probably better than being on campus where, anything could happen to you. I mean, you were just, it's like you didn't have your human rights. So you have to look at it in the context of that. Would Paul Babeu be a good person to have in Congress? Well, I don't think so. He obviously doesn't have very high, morals and scruples. But is he really any different from anyone else or I should say for a lot of people who are in the government and in law enforcement? I don't think so. I know that this stuff is rampant. One of my girlfriends was raped there. She was raped by another student, and nothing happened to him. He was sent back to the Virgin Islands. There were also allegations against one of the teachers while I was there. One of the kids was saying that this teacher had molested him, and all that happened was everybody accused him of lying, like just making stuff up. About the showers, we did take group showers, but it wasn't really a big deal. It was just like taking group showers at the gym or whatever. And I never saw any sexual abuse in the showers. I never personally saw any sexual abuse, but I did hear of it from some of my friends. Like, tell you, Michael would do things like answer the door in a bathrobe or answer the door naked, ask the girls to sit on the bed with him. The girls, I know he was gay, but one of my friends said that. And also he would sleep in the bed with the boys, but that's what I heard, that he slept in bed with boys, but that he didn't touch them. He usually had like a group of boys that he would lavish attention and gifts on that we called Michael's puppies. And we would see them at night lounging in his living room through the glass. All these good-looking boys. And I was so innocent at the time that, although I guess I did think it was a bit weird, but it never occurred to me that Michael would be abusing them, because we trusted Michael. And like I say, he was like God to us. He was like the Christ. So, the Messiah, I never thought that this was happening, or I didn't want to think it. I knew that we were being treated not very well, in my opinion. We were overworked. We were neglected physically. To different extents, a lot of the times we spent so much time cleaning that we were dirty. We couldn't take showers sometimes for 3 days. We were sleep deprived. And we were psychologically harassed constantly, like as if they wanted to break you down completely, which is what would happen, basically. It was very, very strange. But you find ways to cope with it when you're in that situation. You find your inner strength, or a part of you inside that helps you be able to live in that environment and not lose your mind completely. Some of the kids were a lot wiser than I was, and they kind of saw what was going on. But I was so trusting that I just thought, if it wasn't working for me, it's because I wasn't making a good enough effort. I wasn't doing things right. I was so innocent, So Paul Babeu's getting smeared. He's kind of being focused on, but we should really be focusing on the larger problem of how children are abused in the system. Plain and simple. And you know, as far as my experience goes with that school, I didn't have the worst experience. I mean, other people had much worse. And when I left, you know, it took a long time for me to sort of recover from it and fit back into society or whatever, you know. I mean, anytime you spend a lot of time, this place was more like a cult than anything. If you're wondering why I was there, I wouldn't say exactly anorexic, but like a lot of teenage girls, you know, I had an eating disorder or something like that. I thought I was fat. I didn't like myself. And my parents didn't know what to do with me. And I don't blame my parents for any of this, because really they got conned. They got conned into sending me there. Michael conned everybody. And, you know, I was there and I tried to do everything right. And finally I just ran away and got on with my life. But once I left, I just kind of, you know, put it behind me. And it actually, I don't have any, you know, bad feelings about it, because it helped me to be who I am now, and it taught me a lot about mind control and about groupthink and about manipulation and about the system. So I learned a lot from my experience. But the system needs to change. You know, somebody needs to speak up for kids who are in it. I guess that's why I kind of try to do that, because I know that there's a lot of problems. And this was an expensive boarding school, residential school. I can only imagine the stuff that goes on with kids who are poor. I mean, you know, if it was amazing that Michael never got into any kind of serious trouble, but that's because he bribed everybody. He bribed all the local officials. That's where the money was going. That's why we lived like Orphan Annie. But for kids who are in foster care, who are poor, for Indian, Native kids, you know, it's got to be hundreds of times worse. But that's the problem. Paul Babeu, he's the least of it. Why is the media focusing on this so much? Why don't they look at the bigger issue? Why don't they look at how people who are in high places are involved in pedophilia and child abuse on a large scale? You know why they don't look at it? Because if they did, they'd lose their jobs. Because it's a conspiracy. That's the way it is. Well, thanks for listening to me, and I'll see you next time.
The truth occurs.